will have a recording. So for all ground floor contemporary artists, welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Jennifer and I'm the gallery manager. And I'm so thrilled to welcome you to our February artist talk for our exhibition phase transition. The artists that are showing today are Sarah Adkins, Jablonski, Erin Bean, and Rebecca Tully Fulmer. And they're going to do a little talk, each of them, and give a background on themselves and then talk about their work. They're going to do a slide presentation and share their screens or pull up our virtual gallery that's on our website right now that you can go and look at too. We're also doing gallery hours on Sundays during exhibition times. So come by if you haven't had a chance to. But thanks again for joining us. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Sarah. She's going to be our first artist that talks. And we're going to go, if you have questions, pop in, but we'd like to kind of reserve questions for the end too. So go right ahead, Sarah. Thanks for doing this.
Cool. Can y'all see my presentation?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone who doesn't know me yet. My name is Sarah Adkins Jablonski, and a lot of my artworks, I use bacterial cultures and scientific illustrations by TechPen to reflect on a lot of my science and personal identities. It's what a large part of my work has looked like in the past several years. So I'm also a PhD student at UAB, where I study microbiology. But something that is a large part of my dissertation work isn't just the science, but I also teach science students how to use agar art, some of the works that you're seeing here, to help reform biology education. So that's really been a large part of the last 5 years for me, is not just learning how to do these types of bio and agar artworks, but teaching science students in pre-meds how to do them themselves in an attempt to reform and make science education a little bit more transdisciplinary. So I'm really honored to be a part of this show, Phase Transition, with Erin Bean and Rebecca Fulmer also. I wanted to talk about why I thought this title was appropriate and what it means to me. So, a phase transition, and this is a graph that I've had to see again and again as I study for the medical college admissions test, or the MCAT, and also in my physics and chemistry coursework. So this term means a qualitative change in any system based on external parameters. So in physics and chemistry, that's thermodynamic parameters like temperature and pressure. And if you're not as familiar with this type of graph or this idea, you can think about water boiling in a pot. So it's a liquid, and I just maybe think to yourself for a second, what temperature does water boil at? So maybe you know that it's 100 degrees Celsius, but something that you don't often think about when you answer that question is that that is conditional on the pressure. So if you were to say 100 degrees Celsius, that would only be true at one particular pressure. So what I'm trying to convince you of is that we really have to think about other parameters in sort of the basic knowledge we have, not only about ourselves, but also things as small as, or as simple as water. So when I think about this term, I'm not just thinking about this transitional state within myself and within the entire world going on right now, but also the fact that we are learning about parameters external to ourselves that we didn't quite think about prior to these shifts happening. So this is a question I was asking myself: which external parameters are changing, and what are things that I hadn't thought about before that are really shifting who I am internally and the way that other people see me? So in some of my works, past, present, and future, which if you can see the slides left, center, and right, I reflect on people in my life as external parameters that have really shaped me and my interest, not just in science, but also as I move forward and apply for and hopefully get into medical school and become a physician. So I took an intro to art therapy course at UAB last year when the world was going into lockdown. And one of the practices that I hadn't quite thought of before that the teacher was teaching us was how to think about colors simply, and that it sounds so elementary now that I say it out loud, but really think about choosing colors and playing with them in a way that represented our moods. And so in these works, I thought about the colors that I was choosing as a reflection of the mood that I was feeling and that I've been feeling for the past several months. I think about sort of being sad. I represent that through blue, but having a little bit of hope in the beiges and golds I choose to use. But I also wanted to balance that with a reflection of the people that are helping me move forward. And so each of these also serves as a portrait of someone that's in my life. So in the left one past, I think about my little sister in the Big Brother, Big Sister program. Her name is Jill. And in a lot of ways, the things that she's going through represent a lot of the things I went through as a young person. And I reflect on that in my med school application, which you can see the screen. This is just an excerpt from that. I relate to her, Jill, being a low-income single parent household. But there are cultural differences in our upbringing that help me understand what it's like to be a young Black girl growing up in the Deep South. I choose to represent her using pictures, different ways of looking at the lungs because of her, she has certain lung conditions. And I've thought about how that might be due in part to environmental pollution happening around Alabama. And these are things I've learned a lot about and hope to continue thinking about as I go on to medical school. In the middle here is a picture some of you may know, Julian Jackson. He was my old studio mate at Ground Floor, but also my graduate colleague. And he has been a huge motivating force for me to not just think about where I am right now in my life, but where I want to go. And he has just completely fascinated by teeth. He's now in dental school at, I think, Boston University, if I remember correctly. And so I think about him not just being obsessed with teeth, but what it means to him, and that's people smiling. And so he's really made me think about what medicine would mean to me. Anyway, yeah, I call this present because he's not just a presence in my life, but sort of the colleagues that I have in my life right now seem to be really motivating me to go forward. And in this last work, it's a portrait of my mom. I think about how I might embody her in my future, and maybe we think about our parents as reflections of our future. And here's an excerpt from her, about her on my medical school application. But first I do want to say, so she has some types of diabetic neuropathies, which I've represented through the feet illustrations, but also I think motherhood is integrally, at least for her, tied to the obvious anatomic representations of the uterus and ovaries. So here's an excerpt that represents her and why I would want to reflect that in my artwork. This is the beginning part of my personal statement to go into med school. I'll tell you right now, I'm not sure I'm confident driving a stick shift, but that didn't stop me from going full throttle to the ER in my mom's 1997 Suzuki as her blood sugar climbed over 300. Some things in life you have to learn fast. I wish I could point to that night helping my mom stabilize and say that's when I wanted to be a doctor. But it wasn't. This lesson has been much more gradual. Instead, the moment offered a personal profundity. Seeing my mom on the brink of death meant one day she would be gone. And that's something I think a lot about because she has diabetic neuropathy and she has certain toe amputations. And I think about my grandmother, her mother, going through some of the very same things. And so in a way, all these portraits are reflecting people in my life, but they also reflect something back onto me. And that's something that I've really had to think critically about as I move forward in my life. And so these next works, What It Takes to Be a Doctor. So these are 6 different pages that are actually from my medical school application, which is a very daunting 20-page document that took over a month to put together. And when I think about it, I see all of the things that are wrong with it. I see the D that I got my junior year of college. I see the fact that like my MCAT score is only 60% better than all applicants, and it's not 80% better than all applicants. But I wanted to sort of retrain my brain to think about the progress that I had made through what is now a 10-year experience. So what I did in this work was I looked at selfies of myself spanning the last 10 years, and I chose 6 of them. And I looked at them without looking at the sheet. So it's a blind drawing, a blind contour drawing of, or many of them, it's sort of semi-contoured. I picked up the pencil a few times, or the pen a few times. But this was me drawing selfies I had taken of myself and imposing them over my med school application. using a type of marker that we use when I worked at Starbucks. So in these works, I was trying to really retell myself my own like personal value and growths outside of the thing that I was trying to aim for. And so like when I look at this, when I see these works, I feel a lot more proud of my accomplishments. But I think it's also something to think about anytime like other people looked at these works in the exhibit and they didn't ask me about these like very particular things I was insecure about. They just wanted to know like, oh, like much more broad things about who I was as a person. And I think that's sort of a lesson that I've been learning not only about myself, but something that I can apply long-term, that people have certain insecurities, but really in ourselves, they don't necessarily define who we are. And there's much more to the story of our growth and development. And so the last work I'll talk about is something that a type of artwork that many of you may be less familiar with. So this is bio art or agar art. In this work, it's an anatomical illustration of a heart. I bought a medical school anatomy textbook illustrated by Frank Netter, one of the sort of fathers of scientific illustration or medical illustration. And I drew one of his hearts in an agar plate. So this is a petri dish filled with a gel. It's called agar that has lots of nutrients bacteria need to grow. And I took certain colonies or samples I had of bacteria and I traced them over the plate. And then I let it incubate for several days. And then what you see now is just the bacteria trying to grow and survive in the shape that I actually drew them in. You can see here on the left some samples of the work that I drew that didn't quite do what I wanted, but they're sort of prototypes, a very simple heart. What I think is cool about the top left heart is you can see the way that this particular bacteria spreads. And in the middle, you can see that the phenotype of the bacteria is just different depending on the other bacteria that surround it, which really make this beautiful, like deep, dark red outline. It only makes that red phenotype when it's not around itself, when it's trying to spread out. And so you can see the finished work here on the right, I call Follow Your Heart, because in the past few years, every time I've invited someone to speak at UAB, a scientist or a researcher, I always sort of tell them about how I'm an artist and I'm a scientist, but I really want to go to med school. I really want to become a physician. And something that I hear time and time again are them just saying like, you should trust the integrity of your interest. You need to follow your heart. So I'm hearing this again and again, and it's really reaffirming the trajectory of life for me. But something else I think is cool is how these works, these agar artworks, tend to represent the fact that we don't actually know that much about the microbiome of humans and how that work itself is driving a lot of science. But I think it's also worth talking about how it intersects with artwork and how we can communicate the importance of bacteria and microbes that aren't just COVID or not just sort of the bad, evil things in terms of how they really enrich our bodies and our health. So that's something I'm interested in going forward. So to answer my first question, what are the external parameters that are really changing me? In fact, I think that a lot of them have instead been more internal as I reflect, as I've been sitting in an apartment, limited access to social life and all of these things while I'm applying for med school, and I'm trying to make art that feels reflective, that maybe the external parameters I was thinking of in the beginning are for me, they really need to be internal, a lot of reflection. So that is my talk and all of the works in the exhibit. I will stop sharing my screen now.
That was so great, Sarah. Thank you so much. So Rebecca, is this a good time for you to go? Is the gallery empty?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
There's one gallery right now. Hey, y'all, I'm Rebecca Fulmer, and I born and raised here in Birmingham, and spent most of my childhood as a classical ballet dancer in early teens and 20s. And then I went to college, majoring in art and art history, but ended up finishing in interior design. those three things, the ballet and interior design, and also my time spent on Mobile Bay, are really heavily come into play in my work a lot. And I'll show y'all some photos. I don't have a PowerPoint quite like Sarah's, but which was wonderful. But anyway, I started my process, which you see behind me, taking pictures of kind of random things. In the beginning, it was because I had to bench my making art for a while I was raising kids. So I thought if I could just document these things that I see, I wouldn't forget to see, which is what a professor told me a long time ago. Never stop seeing, never forget to see. And, you know, sometimes you look at things and you just kind of look past them and forget to notice, you know, what's there. So anyway, I started documenting these things with the iPhone and with the new technology, and kind of collecting these images, similar to holding things for a scrapbook or tearing things out of a magazine, thinking that you'll collage them later. I thought, you know, I'll do something with this down the road. Well, in time, I just started seeing these images in themselves as something, you know, that I could work with. So I started working with them in Photoshop and iPhoto, and really having my background being in painting and collage, my goal was to create something without my hands as if I were painting or creating a collage. And so I would work on these pieces till the balance between the composition and the negative space and the color were to a point where I was happy. And then I started, I was printing them out at first and looking at them in a two-dimensional form, but then I decided I wanted to see them in layers and see how these images played with each other. So I started printing them on transparent film, which is what you see. Actually, I'm gonna have to share a screen. Hold on one second. All right, bear with me. So I started printing these on transparent film, and then all right, I'm gonna go beyond this a little bit. And so as you see in these pictures, I printed on this transparent film, and then I started layering them with mirror so that you could see through the image and see how it reacts with itself. So these are actually boxes that there's about 1.5 inches space between the image and the mirror. So as you get close to these pieces, all right, I've got a video that's missing. Oh, y'all. Anyway, as you get close to these pieces, you can see how they change throughout as you walk through the space. As the ambient light changes throughout the day, the different colors are picked up, and the line kind of moves around as you're walking by these pieces. These, just to show you my process, these pieces started out as the 4 pieces that are in the gallery. I came back, we have a house on Mobile Bay, and I came back to check on the house after the storm, and this is what we found. We had a lot of destruction in our yard. And so I started taking pictures of these Spanish moss in our yard and kind of playing around with them. And then this was the end result of that. But with these pieces, as well as with the collages, the 4 collages that are called Kitsukuro, which means golden repair, and I'll get to that in a second. But they do have a similar theme as to what Sarah was talking about, in that I started to realize that dealing with what we've all been dealing with the past year, 2 years, and the emotional state that we've all been in, you know, how do we get beyond that in a positive way? And how do we get to a point where we learn something from it, and to a point of beauty? And you know how in art, you don't always know what your intention is until you're finished with a piece and looking at it, you know, the end result. And that's when you kind of see what you really were striving for and what your subconscious was driving you. And I think with these pieces, that's where I ended up. These pieces are about destruction and repair and making something beautiful out of, something bad that's happened or something difficult that's happened, and trying to find a place of beauty and a place of growth from that. So anyway, and there's also the term that plays into that is Wabi-Sabi, which I'm sure y'all are familiar with this, but having the world view of the acceptance of transience and imperfection. And how do we do that? How do we get to that point from where we've been? So that's pretty much where I am right now. So that's my end of my talk.
Oh, that's wonderful, Rebecca. Thank you so much. Okay, Erin, go ahead.
You did, huh? Here we go. Y'all can hear me now? Awesome. Okay, I'm Aaron Bean. Let's see if we can get my... And I am an interdisciplinary artist working primarily with photography and installation, as well as many other mediums, including performance and painting. My work mostly speaks to themes of anxiety, influence, and identity through my use of striking color, texture, and the occasional dog or two, which are characters I like to use. I graduated from Birmingham Southern with a degree in graphic marketing this past year in May of 2020, and have emerged into this crazy world in a crazy time. But I now live and work here in Birmingham, and this is my first year and first show with Ground Floor. So I'm really excited about the work and the two great artists I got to share it with. So, and thanks to all the people who were able to come out the other night for the opening. I'll go ahead and start off with this first work. Actually, I'm gonna jump out of order a little bit. With the work that I really kind of started with, this is a body of work that I've been researching and developing for over a year now, almost 2 years. And this is the oldest of the three works that I had in the show. And this is my self-portrait, number 1 of 2. It's almost like a dual image that I have. Most people when seeing this might think that it's a painting, but it is in fact a photograph, a digital photograph that I took of myself. As I said, most of my work speaks to my experience with anxiety and depression in a time that, really trying to, understand myself more, as anybody does at any point in their life, but especially when I first started experiencing anxiety, which was in college. It's already a time that you're trying to learn so much and better understand yourself. And so I began to make work that spoke to my experience with anxiety. And I often use this striking, deep red, almost blood red color to convey that emotion of stress. And you'll see a lot of texture in my works as well. I actually used a piece of plastic, like a opaque plastic that I taped to the front of my lens to get this effect. So this wasn't digitally manipulated afterwards. There was a red light used and some plastic to get this effect. But this blurriness, distortion is kind of just, again, speaking back to the anxiety, the headiness, the cloudiness that one experiences in times like this. And this was really the starting point and a progression that I've come to realize more and more, even after the opening, what this work has meant to me. And so moving beyond this, I'm going to jump back to, well, actually here, you can see a little bit of the setup I had for this shot. So this is at the Art Annex at Birmingham Southern. I have a work light hanging from the ceiling, featuring the red light bulb that I would use in this work and a lot of my installation-based work, site-specific installations. I like to use light to reinforce my work as well as sound sometimes. The chair and then just a tripod, and I try to control the light as best I could from those external windows, as you can see. But I'm going to jump next to the second of three works in the show, and this is my work, Good Side Confined Accident. This is actually the first, what I would consider sculptural work I've ever created. And so it was a little bit daunting going into the show to do something like this. But this is a resin block with acrylic ink dyeing it and laminated. These were formerly the dogs, as you can see, that line the backside were a character I've commonly used in past work to embody someone who's experiencing anxiety, or embody an aggressor, or someone who's influencing the character. And so it kind of goes both ways. It plays like dual identities essentially. And that character was taken from kind of an old school tattooing style, where you see a lot of animals depicted very aggressively, a lot of line work, simple line work. And something I just took from them was the energy that these characters usually have, and I found it really representative of my experience. This is a work by Byron Saunier, who's actually a local Birmingham artist, and someone who I've looked to a lot when creating my work. But there's actually several more dogs inside the block if you were to crack it open. But I originally wanted to make a sleek, rectangular cuboid type shape that I realized more and more was just a way of signifying something very confined and tight and rigid. And in the creation of this piece, I actually had some sort of reaction where the resin quickly started rising and got very hot like a stove, and was hot for the rest of the day. Actually was not planned. And so it ended up with this the gnarly backside that you're seeing, and a lot of these dogs kind of got pushed to the surface, which, just more and more points back to the conceptual things that I try to do. It even when I was trying to avoid texture, I ended up with texture. And as Rebecca was saying, Wabi-Sabi, rolling with the imperfections is something that I like to do in my work, and I don't mind, and I welcome. And so this is the result of this. But it was I've been making this work for a long time and have more and more understood about myself and how I treat my mental health and being more aware of myself. But even in the creation of the show, making this work has kind of provided me new revelations. And that is most exemplified in this work titled 9 Squares of Red, The Veil Was Torn. I will go ahead and say that there is no significance in the number. I was asked that a couple times at the opening. There are just 9 squares. But when creating this work, I was kind of struggling post grad, redirecting my work in a new way. And so I began painting just these squares in a large sketchbook I had, just a solid red, kind of thinking of color field paintings like Mark Rothko. I find that what I lack in my ability to representationally draw, I just really enjoy works that kind of provoke a emotional appeal. And so I find that just large, blank canvases of color really do it for me. And so I just began doing this and see where it went from this. And I adapted a sheet of tulle, which you see hanging about a ½ inch out from the wall and from the paper, which is mounted to the wall, that I adapted from a past installation. And there's kind of broken acrylic lines that were painted on the sheet of tulle that are laying over it. And so this again kind of alludes back to that headiness, the barrier that's blocking someone's mind. And so in this piece, really, it's almost a reversal of what you might think. The red is more so the individual, the internal feeling, and you're looking inside and the barrier that's blocking. However, I originally wasn't going to cut the veil going into this show. It was supposed to just be there. But in the month of January, I was kind of in a time of prayer and fasting, and in my faith was in my Christian faith, I was finding a time to where often a veil is eluded as a barrier between your connection to God. And kind of subconsciously, I had been doing this a lot to myself, where clearly I was creating this body of work where I was alluding to these things, this distraction, this inability, this inhibiting thing from connection socially, in work, spiritually, in my daily life. And I was presented a verse in this time of prayer in the month of January, where I decided to just kind of symbolically break that veil and show that my connection to God and my faith is, directly open. And that although my anxiety often acts as a hindrance and a barrier, that, these things can be broken. And so it was actually really meaningful for me to go in when installing this work and to cut that veil. I've also included in this just a couple more images from past work. I'm hoping to continue making some work similar to the first portrait, where here you can see on the left a image of my old room that I was staying in, and I've often tried to depict this anxiety in different environments and different scenarios of life, whether it be where you live, how you work. You can see the dog here repeating again. This was more digitally manipulated in that I took a picture of a past work, this painting of the dog, and then just clone stamped it, repetition kind of to an overwhelming point. But this is something I want to experiment with more going into the future, as well as maybe some performance type work. These are two performance artists that I'm really inspired by, that being Chris Burden on the left and Pope L on the right. I found more and more that with my work, like I said, in the installation, that although representative work is really appealing to me, that for me, a lot of my process is conceptual, and that I have to go into my studio thinking for a long time before I'm making these works. And often, bringing the body into a work is one of the most powerful ways of conveying the emotions that I'm wanting to, hence the self-portrait. And so this is something I'm wanting to continue to explore in future work as well. But it's been really enriching for me to see, honestly, my own personal growth through these three works, and not really realizing it until bringing them together in one space like this. And so, yeah, that is my work, and that is my presentation. So thanks, y'all.
Thanks so much, you guys. That was really incredible. I love hearing you guys expand on the ideas that you put into your work and your process. I'll open it up for questions to anybody who's got anything they want to jump in with right now. I've got one for Rebecca, actually. I was wondering if you'd talk about your 4 pieces that are in the vertical and the name of them and where that comes from.
I think you're muted, Rebecca.
Always read that. The name of these pizzas are kitsukuru, which means golden repair. And it's the pottery, the idea of like a broken bowl instead of throwing it away, you put it back together again and you make the joints and the cracks something beautiful, and you gild. In Japan, I guess you would gild the cracks. So it's a way of just turning something bad into something good, you know? And so, do you want me to talk about the collages? Can I share that screen again with the photo?
Mhm.
Sorry, not as technically savvy. Here we go.
That's okay.
So, yeah, these 3 pieces are made with, they're canvas and they're framed, and then the it's a black and white striped tissue paper that I kind of cut in a way to where it would have, I didn't want to tear it. I wanted it to have some clean edges, and then the edges overlap to where the black and white lines kind of have almost a 3D effect. And there's a bit of a optical kind of dance as you walk around these pieces as well, where you really don't know what's happening until you get close. And as you go from one side to the other, it's a pewter leaf that's in the crack, and it ends up picking up different lights and kind of moves as you walk around it as well.
I was going to say, based on personal experience of seeing this piece, it definitely messes with your eyes, kind of similar to the other 4 works you have behind you. Even with the photographs, I found that being on one side of them, I was like, I could say, oh, this one's my favorite. And then just by walking to the other side of the room, they completely transform. So it's
something I think I just always end up striving towards, is to create change within a static piece. And, you know, I love the aspect of that if you're walking around, it changes as you walk around it, but it also changes during whatever time of day and whatever light is coming through as well. And different colors pop out at different times. And it's almost like these things do their own thing together. These images are reacting to themselves and creating this whole other work on their own. I just put them together.
Well, I thought that the names that you incorporated into that piece was really interesting, because I looked it up and I didn't know, but like that idea of like resisting disposable culture, and understanding that the dish that breaks is just like its lifespan, like making the cracks stand out so that you see them and you understand the lifespan of the dish. So it was really great, and I liked that.
Thank you.
Any more questions? I'm not scared of questions, so.
Well, I'm just like really excited to see all of this in person. It feels like a lot of it, you've got to be right there with it. And I appreciate how all 3 of you are so open, kind of your rawness and vulnerability while you're talking about this. So thank you. It's a great show. It looks great.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would second that too, Patty B. Like there's something about hearing the artist talk about their work that really, really expands the meaning and the conceptual parameters of the piece. So I think all 3 of you guys, it was such a joy to hear you talk. And I really appreciate your letting us share your work, you know, and the time that you spent putting this show together. It was a lot of hard work. So thank you very much for that. But if nobody's got anything else, we can wrap. We can say farewell. You guys did a great job today. So thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.